Trust in a Good Book by MeridianGrimm, read by Podfic. Summary. When an ability user duplicates Poe's ability and traps Poe and Ranpo inside a book, the two detectives must solve their way through their cases together if they want to escape. Chapter 1. If he'd been paying attention, Ranpo might have noticed the signs. The front gate is unlocked when he gets to Poe's apartment, and he can't hear Poe's cleaning the house playlist even though the windows are open. He always cleans on Tuesdays. Ranpo should have known something was wrong, but instead, he'd been thinking about the new puzzle he and Poe were planning to work on today, and how much ice cream Poe still had in his freezer. So when he walks in to find the stranger with a knife to Poe's throat, he's completely off guard. Ranpo drops his drink in shock and spills across the floor of the entryway, forgotten. As the little details that Ranpo has forgotten suddenly come together to make an unpleasant picture. Who are you? So the intelligence wasn't wrong, the man says, ignoring Ranpo's question. Poe flinches as the knife shifts, and Ranpo feels his heart clench. The Armed Detective Agency's most powerful detective makes a habit of visiting a man whose organization was previously at war with the agency. What do you want? Ranpo asks, unable to squash down the spike of fear for his friend. Poe doesn't have any martial arts skills or combat experience, and he'd been kept off the front lines for most of the guild's war with the agency. Poe may have spent years planning elaborate revenge in the form of the perfect mystery novel, but Ranpo has learned that Poe is, at heart, a sweet, shy man. They've been close friends for months now, and Ranpo can't bring himself to imagine what life would look like with a Poe-shaped void. What do I want from you? Nothing. I just need the agency's greatest threat to us out of the way, since your super deduction has been crucial during previous confrontations with agency enemies. I'll cooperate, he lies, wondering if he can get away with dialing the Armed Detective Agency's number from the phone in his pocket. Even if Ranpo's voice doesn't come through clearly, they might be able to guess that something's wrong. You can let him go. I still need him alive, for the next 30 seconds anyway. Pick up the book, he orders, indicating an unfamiliar volume on the coffee table. And if I see any hint that you're trying to escape, remember that I said alive and not uninjured. Ranpo reaches for the book. The dust jacket is missing, and the only word on the cover is anthology, which doesn't give away much about its contents. Sit down and begin reading out loud. Ranpo is surprised, since transporting people into stories is Poe's power. But when he slips on his glasses in the pretense of needing them to read, it suddenly clicks. The intruder can mimic other abilities. He's already indicated that Ranpo is his primary target, and it makes sense that he would keep Poe alive after breaking in so that he could use Poe's ability to trap Ranpo in a fictional world. There are a couple of reasons he may have needed Poe in the room when Ranpo arrived, like needing physical contact to duplicate the ability, or having no other method to keep Poe from going for help. As for why he isn't killing Ranpo, there must be some other goal. Perhaps this mysterious organization plans to force Ranpo to use super deduction for their own purposes, or use their stranger to replicate its effect. Ranpo seats himself on the sofa, mind racing to come up with some route out of here where he and Poe don't end up dead, and begins to read. The entrance for Beckett and Brown's was dark, and the closed sign hanging on the doorknob was still dripping from the early evening storm. But the figure who entered the offices was undeterred by the indications that the detectives were not accepting clients at the moment. The light and wind of Black Cat in the Rue Morgue starts to swirl around him. But before the last of his vision fades to white, he sees the silhouette of the stranger push Poe towards him, and then the two detectives are swept away. When the effects of the stolen ability clear, there's gravel digging into Ranpo's back and a weight on top of him. The gravel, he discovers, is part of an old cracked road that appears to be unused at this time of night. The weight, he discovers, is Poe. Pokon, are you alright? I was so worried. I'm glad you're okay. Poe squeezes him in a tight hug. But Ranpo doesn't mind as long as it means that Poe is happy. In fact, there are many things that Ranpo doesn't mind as long as Poe is happy. Ranpo is indifferent to physical contact with most people, but lately there's been something warm in his chest when Poe grabs his hand or pulls him into a hug or curls up next to him on the couch. Ranpo indulges in the feeling for a few moments before remembering the situation. Do you know where we are? He asks, rolling Poe off of him and getting to his feet. Poe stands up too and shakes his head. It wasn't one of my books. He must have brought it with him. It's just an average book. That's boring. Can you get us out of here? If I brought us here, then I could. But it was his ability, mirroring mine, that did it. I was built in a back door when I used my ability, usually a small item or an actual door from the setting, but he didn't. Ranpo finishes. Right, we need to complete the story to leave, Poe states. Time passes a little differently in here, but with someone about to attack the Armed Detective Agency, we have to move quickly. We can't stay in here for a plot that lasts weeks or months. And no one said anything about a new rival to me, so it must be completely unexpected, Ranpo muses. You're right. The sooner we leave, the sooner we can just uncover the secrets and stop them. He'll personally make sure that the ability stealer is left in Dazai's care. Not just because Dazai can nullify their powers, but because Ranpo knows that Dazai is particularly creative when it comes to scaring the wits out of captured enemies. The ability stealer will be too terrified to even consider laying a hand on Poe again. The closest street light flickers for a moment, drawing Ranpo's attention back to their surroundings. Looking around, it's clear to him that they're not in Japan anymore, and the old-fashioned cars parked on the street suggest that the story doesn't take place in the present day. Directly in front of them is an office door with the words, Beckett and Brown, Private Investigators, inscribed on the rusting sign. As they watch, The letters flicker and vanish. It is replaced with others until the sign reads Edogawa and Poe, private investigators. Oh, Poe says. If we're the protagonists, I suppose we better go in. The office interior matches the sign up front, once grand but beginning the descent into disrepair. Most of the furniture is covered in a layer of dust. The flag on the wall is faded, and the paneled wood doesn't shine like it used to. Poe and Ranpo venture further inside and find two women in the waiting area, one behind the assistant's desk and the other seated on one of the guest sofas. The secretary looks over at them in surprise. Mr. Poe, Mr. Edogawa, I thought you were gone for the night, but it's a good thing you came back when you did. This woman here says she has a case for you, and I was about to send her home. Poe turns to Ranpo and whispers, I think we're in a hard-boiled mystery. All the styles here fit. Hardboiled? Oh, we watched a couple of those. They're dark and gritty, and usually set during the American Prohibition. You thought the detectives were overdramatic. Ugh, that sounds familiar. Let's get this over with quickly, then. He looks over to the client and raises his voice. What's the case you have for us? It's something that's been a problem for my company for a while now. And earlier today, there was an incident that pushed it to our top priority. Ranpo slips on the glasses from his pocket. Not his glasses. These are something from the character he's taken over. And decides that the ability stealer may not have thought to build a no abilities rule into this fictional universe. With that settled, he considers the confidence in the potential client's posture, her lack of fear traveling alone late at night off the main roads, the way she's controlling her facial expression to be disinterested, even though the situation must be dire for her to come here. Her attire suggests a job with high income, and the nice concealers in her dress say that she's far from defensive. You're in the local mafia, Ranpo deduces with his ability, tucking his glasses back where he found them when he's done. You have plenty of resources. Why do you need us? This issue isn't something that can be covered by our ordinary forces. Ranpo crosses his arms. What is it? A hitman gone rogue? A new drug network in town? Get to the point. Demons, Mr. Edogawa. Ranpo and Poe exchange a look. Overdramatic, Poe repeats quietly, and Ranpo can't say he disagrees. There's the fact that Poe is the one calling someone else's writing dramatic strikes him as a pot and kettle scenario. He turns back to the potential client. Tell us more. Despite what some members of the agency would say, Fukuzawa had managed to teach Ranpo a couple of things about personal safety and stranger danger. However, fiction relies on keeping the reader guessing, so he and Poe will probably have to go along with the cloak and dagger elements to advance the story. Cue eye roll. Fine, the client, who identifies herself as Miss Nicole, takes them to a warehouse that stores some of the company's illegal shipments. The outside would look normal if not for this group of shady individuals camped outside who nodded Miss Nicole's. The inside, though, looks like it's been torn apart by wild animals. Three of our best were on duty when this went down. According to the witness, who'd been on his way to perform a routine inventory check, all three were killed instantly by a posse of creatures that looked like they'd been summoned from hell. Poe mutters a yikes under his breath, and when he noticed that Ranpo is too busy looking around to respond to the client, decides that one of them has to ask the questions. You said this had been a problem for a while? People like us always get sabotaged from other syndicates or vigilante types. This level of damage is new, but the modus operandi is not. We've seen these apparent animal attacks on several properties under our protection, which has made a mess of regular operations. There have been urban legends about monsters in this town for decades, and what tonight's witness said about them fits with the stories about demons. What do you think we can do? Find a way to stop it. Miss Nichols checks her watch. I'll be available by telephone for most of the night, while my assistant continues to sort out the paperwork. And I expect you to report to my office when you've made progress. She hands Ranpo a business card, which he immediately turns and passes to Poe. Of the two of them, Poe's more likely to keep track of it. It's an inside job, Poe says once Miss Nichols closes the door behind her. That's not fair. I haven't put on my glasses yet. Ranpo scowls. What makes you think so? That's what I would do if I were writing this. Plus, he gestures around them at the warehouse. This attack was timed very carefully. Until tonight, the mafia higher-ups were satisfied with the idea that trained animals did this. Someone made sure that there was a witness to confirm the rumors, which is what brought Miss Nichols to us. They were trying to provoke fear. The only way they could have such specific information about the inventory schedule is if there were a spy in the organization. Computers haven't been invented yet, so nobody hacked their information. Ranpo gives him a look that he can't interpret. What? Did I get something wrong? No, I just don't think I've seen you on a case since that first time we met. Poe flashes at the mention of the loss. Well, we have to move quickly now, since the ancient seems in danger, but so I'll do my best. Ranpo smiles and Poe's heart jumps. Let's go then. Go? Where? To go check out suspects, obviously. I can't use super deduction without gathering any facts. Otherwise, I just solve everything from the agency's office. They walk to a main road and hail a cab to the office building is listed on Miss Nichols' card. The security guard is reluctant to let them in. But when Ranpo shows her the business card and glares in a way that he clearly thinks is threatening, and Poe immediately describes as adorable, she lets him pass. Miss Nichols' assistant doesn't look impressed with the detectives, but he gives them directions to the lounge where the witnesses recover. Ranpo steps in, puts his glasses on, and immediately walks back out. You didn't do it. He hasn't told his kids yet that he's finally met someone again, but he's not hiding anything related to work. That was quick. Poe wonders how long it had taken the original detectives in the story to figure that out, and he can't hide a smile. Ranpo really is amazing. When they walked back to the waiting area in front of Miss Nichols' office, it's empty. Let's see if her assistant has a planner somewhere with her activities. And with that, Ranpo starts opening the drawers in her assistant's desk. You think Miss Nichols did it? You're the mystery writer. Aren't there lots of cases where the person who hires the detective is the one who did it? Poe opens his mouth to reply, and then does a double take. I thought you didn't read mysteries. You said that fictional stuff wasn't good enough for detectives. Ranpo's hand stutters in its movements. I didn't say that I read them. I only said that sometimes the culprit hires detectives. It's happened at the Armed Detective Agency before, so it makes sense if it showed up in novels too. I don't believe you. I think you have read some. Ranpo is silent for a moment before saying, well, not for a challenge, but when it's between that and doing paperwork, I'll settle for a mediocre case. Poe grins, pleased that he's learned something new about Ranpo. However, he doesn't want Ranpo to take his smile the wrong way, so he changes the subject. Have you found anything yet? Ranpo shrugs. Poe takes that as his cue to plop into the desk chair to help out. Unfortunately, all the books stacked under the desk make the space too cramped for his legs, so he abandons the chair in favor of collecting the miscellaneous documents that Ranpo is tossing aside. A letter of promotion, a family photo, some bank statements. They don't fit a planner, but they do manage to reorganize the desk by the time Miss Nichols' assistant returns to it. He looks at them suspiciously as they leave, and Poe waves awkwardly. They're about 2 blocks away from the office, having decided to go look at the other attack sites when they hear the howls. Maybe it's a group of dogs, Poe suggests. Happy dogs that are just very excited about something. When he looks back a moment later and spots a pack of creatures that could not be considered dogs by any stretch of the imagination, he grabs Ranpo's hand and they run. The moment they break from their slow pace, the howls go up again, and without looking back, it's obvious that they've begun the chase. Poe curses under his breath. Neither of them are athletes, and they don't know the area at all, so Poe knows that they have a limited window to find a solution before the creatures catch up. What places would even be open at this time of night to offer them sanctuary? Most normal businesses had been closed by the time Poe and Ranpo entered the story, and since they're on a less populated road, there are no cabs in sight. Out of nowhere, Ranpo puts on a burst of speed and tugs Poe to the left into a cemetery. When they're about 20 steps down the path, the eager growls behind them turn into wails of frustration. Peeking back, Poe sees them all gathered outside the gates to the cemetery, furious, but no longer pursuing them. Poe jerks to a halt and leans against the closest headstone to catch his breath. Beside him, Ranpo is doing the same. That was a great idea, Poquin, he says as he finally gets enough air to speak. They probably can't come onto church grounds or something. I just thought we'd have a lot of places to hide here. Poe laughed. They've been saved through sheer luck then. Maybe being the protagonists puts coincidence on their side. Poe definitely doesn't mind taking advantage of fictional tropes if it keeps them from getting killed in here. Ranpo still hasn't let go of Poe's hand, and now that they're out of immediate danger, Poe has time to appreciate how delicate and warm Ranpo's hand is. This feels comfortable, feels right, like it always does when they hold hands. And Poe suddenly hopes that Ranpo will attribute his blush to their recent exertions. The growling in the background stops abruptly, and Poe's head snaps up. The creatures are gone from the gateway. Not decide to walk away, some are still trailing behind gone. Just vanished. The sudden lack of sound is just as eerie as its presence had been, and Poe shivers. They wait about 10 minutes, which is about all Ranpo's patience can handle, before leaving the cemetery to trace their steps back to the office. It takes 10 more minutes before they admit that they're completely lost, at which point Ranpo points to a phone booth. I have an idea. He takes the business card from Poe and starts to dial up Miss Nichols' office. Poe leans against the wall of the booth and closes his eyes, wishing he was at home under his covers. I need to talk to Miss Nichols, Ranpo says, speaking at a higher pitch than usual. She's expecting my call. Poe can vaguely hear her assistant agree and then put them through. Yes? Ranpo's voice returns to normal. It's Edagawa and Poe. We'd normally report to you personally, but we're too lazy and also lost. If you give me a street address, I can send someone to collect you. No need, Miss Nichols. I've already solved the case. Poe's eyes shoot open, and he sees Ranpo's glasses perched on his nose. Your recently promoted assistant, the man whose desk is outside your office and who answered the phone just now, is the culprit. He sent his creatures after us when we left your office, having just overturned the contents of his desk. He needed the salary increase to pay his sister's medical bills, so he set up attacks which he then efficiently cleaned up, proving his skill to you and the other higher-ups. He couldn't keep his spellbooks at home because his niece is staying with him, so they're still under his desk. With those words, a familiar cyclone of light surrounds them, washing away the phone booth and the street and the buildings around them. Poe blinks a few times, and he finds himself with Ranpo in a room of doors, circling the otherwise empty space. The walls stretch up into oblivion, and everything is the same bland color. There's nothing in here to indicate the purpose of the room. But we're still inside the book, Poe says. Ranpo-kun, what was the title of this? It's an anthology, Ranpo remembers, his eyes widening in realization. and the series of doors suddenly take on more significance. Poe continues their train of thought out loud. We finished one story, but we're not done with the book. We're in the table of contents. I understand now why our attacker brought this book. It might take days to work our way out of here. It's not a prison, then, but a labyrinth, designed to give the agency's new enemies more time to decide where to keep Poe and Ranpo. The armed detective agency doesn't have that long, Poe points out. We can't go through them systematically. Ranpo taps his chin thoughtfully. We should try one of the doors next to this one. Like a real table of contents, there should be some kind of order about which stories are behind which door. If the room is a circle, then, logically, the door to either the left or right of the first story should be the last one, yes? That's a good thought. I think we should go with the one on the right. Left. Poe blinks at him. It has to be the left. Stranger was more comfortable speaking to me in English before you arrived. And English is read left to right. So the door to the right of this one should be the second story. And loop around counterclockwise to the end. But it's written in the format of a Japanese novel, so it's actually the reverse. Poe frowns. It could go either way, I suppose. 2 cases, 3 cases. It doesn't matter how long we escape before the agency's enemies are expecting us. Let's try the left then, if you're okay with that. Either way, we have to solve a mystery, Ranpo says, taking Poe's hand and moving towards the next door. He turns the doorknob, and they step through, the doorframe vanishing behind them like smoke. This time, they emerge on a forest road dressed for hiking. No, not hiking. They're cycling, Poe realizes as he spots the pair of bikes leaning up against a tree close by. He's wearing gloves with pads on the palms, and both he and Ranpo have backpacks. A cursory look at the pack's contents shows their new IDs, maps of hiking trails in Japan, and plenty of emergency supplies. Poe also finds a pair of bifocals in his backpack, and wordlessly hands them to Ranpo, who smiles. Poe looks at the road sloping up ahead of them. I guess we should see what's ahead. Then, as an afterthought, do you know how to ride a bike, Ranpo-kun? Ones with training wheels, yeah. I don't think we have any of those. I could teach you sometime if you wanted. Poe spends a moment dwelling on the fact that he'd need to hold onto Ranpo's waist for this exercise to work, and he can't keep the smile off of his face. Is it fun with only 2 wheels? Definitely, Poe promises, and grabs the closest bike by the handles and walks towards the hill. Ranpo following suit behind him with the second bike. The ground quickly evens out, and the forest stretches endlessly in front of them. They spot a large structure a ways off, indistinct until they get closer. When Poe figures out what the building is, he stops. A house in the woods. A perfect spot for a murder, Ranpo finishes. An isolated place is pretty traditional, isn't it? They continue their approach at a steady pace until there's a rustle in one of the windows. Poe gasps as a body is suddenly pushed out of the second-floor window and lands beside the bushes. The culprit, who's obscured by the still-closed windows, probably doesn't even know that they're out here. Poe drops the bike and runs over to the motionless figure on the ground. He crushes and checks the woman's pulse, but the corpse is already cold. She's dead. Well, that was quick, Ranpo says. Chapter 3. In the split second after he realizes that the case has already begun, Poe decides to prioritize identifying the killer over figuring out how exactly the victim died. It's been about 3 hours since she died, based on the skin temperature, so he won't lose too much information by waiting another couple of minutes. The murderer, on the other hand, could accomplish any number of things in that short time frame, and the 4 cars in the driveway suggest that the murderer and the victim hadn't been alone. He runs to the door, his longer legs carrying him faster than Ranpo, and rings the doorbell. He knocks too, for good measure, hoping that they might be let in fast enough to catch someone acting suspiciously. After 2 minutes of intermittent knocking that feel like an eternity, a girl who looks about 17 answers the door. Can I help you? Behind her, the fire alarm is blaring, and there seems to be a commotion in one of the rooms across the house. There's been a murder, he says. As if to punctuate his statement, the alarm abruptly cuts off. She blinks. What? Where? Outside the house. We need to speak with someone who's been here in the last 3 hours, 4 to be safe. Is there a woman in her 40s missing from the household right now? She gasps. My aunt. She's dead? Poe freezes. He's not usually the one who has to contact the next of kin. Normally during his cases, the victim's family had either witnessed the crime or had already spoken to the police. He doesn't know if there's an easy way to break the news, so he goes with honesty. Yes, I'm sorry to say so. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't, I suppose, unless she wants to go look at the body. But Poe's not callous enough to say that to the dead woman's niece. We're detectives, he finally says. She looks up and down at their athletic gear. Really? We're not working right now or anything. We were just passing by when we saw her. What was she wearing? Poe describes the woman's clothes, and the girl's expression shudders. Come inside, she says dully. There are some people you need to talk to. She leads them through the house to the kitchen, which is the source of the din. Inside, they find 5 people opening windows and cleaning up from a small fire that seems to have started with the toaster. She taps the shoulder of the person closest to the entrance, a young woman in her early 20s. Forgive me, son. These people say that they found my aunt outside and that she's been killed. That draws the attention of everyone in the room. A spindly man with a rather unfortunate mustache assesses them. Who are you? He asks, suspicion written on his face. And how do you know it was murder? Ranpo scoffs. Of course we know it was murder. We're the greatest detectives in the world. Well, there's also the fact that they saw the body fall, but Ranpo conveniently leaves that out. It's possible that Ranpo decided to hide that information from the culprit on purpose, but it's more likely that he just wanted to be dramatic. Poe hides an inappropriate snort. My siblings and I have never heard of you, one of the other men says, indicating a man with similar features, and Fuyumi-san. And we've worked with the police on cases across the nation since we were 15. Poe just knows that Ranpo is about to pipe up and say that he's been a great detective since he was 14. So he puts a hand on Ranpo's shoulder and suddenly shakes his head when Ranpo looks over. Ranpo shoots him a look that clearly says spoil sport, but he keeps his mouth shut. The young girl looks over at them, a hint of weariness lingering in her voice. The Harada triplets are famous for what they do. If you show them where you found where you found her, I'm sure they'll be able to solve the case. Yes, the man says. Please show us where you found Ikehara-san and recount how exactly you came across her. We'll be able to take it from there. The man's condescending tone rubs Poe the wrong way, and he frowns. We're quite capable of conducting an investigation, thank you. Why would we need your help? Poe searches for a reason beyond the truth, which is that they probably don't need Poe and Ranpo, but the two of them need to stick around in order to escape the story. We're, a neutral party. No matter how tangentially, you know the suspects personally. Not enough to impair our investigation. We also have more knowledge of everyone's movements during this case, so we're naturally a better fit. Well, now he's just getting on Poe's nerves. So we should all investigate then. It's not a competition to see who can solve it first, he points out, crossing his arms. Yeah, Ranpo adds offhandedly. Because if it was, we'd win. The atmosphere in the room completely shifts in an instant. Poe and Ranpo are suddenly the focus of three very frosty gazes from the detectives, and the three bystanders are trying to hide their interest at this turn of events. Poe immediately wants to hide behind Ranpo. What? Why do you all look so surprised? It's something even a child could figure out. You keep telling us not to investigate, like you're worried that you'd lose if you went 2 against 3. The sibling who'd been speaking so far exchanges looks with the other triplets, and they come to a silent conclusion. I suppose, in the spirit of finding the killer, we can all investigate. Ranpo pumps his fist in victory, and Poe covers his face to hide his embarrassment. They're probably not doing a great job of convincing people that they're mature, responsible adults. Though to be fair, Poe isn't entirely convinced of that either. When his face stops burning, Poe gives their names to the other detectives. The man who had been speaking is Haruda Toshio, and his brother and sister are Masashiro and Fuyumi, respectively. Natsumi Akako, who had been staying at their house with her aunt, is the girl who answered the door. The woman across the room with the fire extinguisher introduces herself as Morita Saki, a doctor, and the man with the mustache is an accountant who gives his name as Oshiro Goto. An awkward silence follows the introductions, like no one is certain how to proceed on an investigation with two leading factions. Poe takes a deep breath and releases it, forcing himself to stop shaking. He's nervous at the idea of being the focus of everyone's attention, but someone has to get the ball rolling. We need to know if there has been anyone else in or out of the house in the last 4 hours. No, it's just been us, Natsumi answers. My aunt invited everyone here for a small party this afternoon. Wait, you think one of us did it? Yoshiro asks. It's a valid question, Masashiro says. The last time we saw Ikehara-san, she was in the house, and no one but us had been in here. Why would someone have killed her now? We've all been out at the table in the dining room playing cards. No one would risk that with so many witnesses here. Oh, please, Morita mutters. Like you wouldn't have offered her given half a chance. Everyone's attention shifts to her, and she sighs, ignoring the glare that Oshiro's sending her way. I know she found out about your side misses. When you saw that she invited 3 nationally known detectives today, of course you would have panicked. Nice attempt at diversionary tactics, but if anyone here was going to kill Kumiko-chan, it's you. Ushida and I would have been fine without her interference. Morita shoots back, her body tense. As if remembering that there are 5 detectives here looking for a murderer, she steps back and relaxes. She puts the fire extinguisher down and crosses her arm instead. Well, Poe says, not voicing the rather obvious fact that they now have 2 suspects with a motive. It's about time we expected the scene. And to prevent anyone here being left alone to tamper with evidence, I suggest that we all move as a group. There are noise all around, so Poe and Ranpo take the lead with the party guests, while the triplets bring up the rear. With the body coming into view, Poe sees Natsumi flinch and lean into Morita, who puts a comforting arm around her. And even Oshiro looks disturbed at his former friend's remains. In contrast, the Haradas get ready to work, crouching down to examine Ikehara. Ranpo takes up a spot a few steps away from the victim, and Poe moves to stand beside him and observe. Once everyone else's attention is diverted, Poe leans in closer to Ranpo. What was that about before? We're not the main characters this time, just the witnesses. The 3 of them have the power of the narrative on their side. Ranpo's lips pull into a mischievous grin. Yeah, but you're really competitive, and I've got super deduction. So we're about to beat them at the only thing they're good at. Ranpo hides a snicker behind his hand, clearly pleased with the situation, and if Poe had any less self-control right now, he'd kiss him. Confidence looks good on Ranpo, and he certainly has plenty of it. Poe wonders if Ranpo would be confident with kissing. Unfortunately, Poe has no approximation of how much kissing Ranpo had done in his life, so he can't even make a guess. But honestly, Poe knows that he'd be happy with whatever approach Ranpo takes to kissing. Wait, crime scene. Shouldn't be thinking about this right now. Poe shakes his head and turns to observe the investigation. The most immediately apparent detail is the red post-mortem staining on the body, which suggests poison rather than natural causes. Poe watches one of the Harada brothers, Toshio, based on the green dress shirt that distinguishes him from Masashiro in the red polo. Check Ikehara's eyes and notice that they're dilated. Further evidence of poison. There are no signs of needle marks on her arms or neck, so it's likely that the poison was transferred through the skin or ingested. Poe moves over to where Natsumi is standing, Ranpo trailing behind him. Has your aunt been on any medication that you know of? Natsumi takes this excuse to look away from the Triplet's investigation. She doesn't take anything regularly, but she had a couple of aspirin today since she hasn't been feeling well. He needs to tread carefully here. Natsumi-san, there are signs that your aunt, may have been poisoned. When did she start feeling sick? I don't know. Just earlier. She went to lie down a few hours ago, and then when Masashiro-san went to check on her, she was gone. Where did you look for her? We didn't. There was a fire, and then you showed up just as we finished putting it out. So the killer removes the body from the house to delay the time of discovery, and the fire starts at almost the same time. Interesting. The group moves to Ikehara's bedroom next. Many of Poe's previous investigations have taken him to the private rooms of deceased victims. It always strikes him that the rooms should feel colder or more empty, should have some tangible manifestation of the fact that their owners will not be returning. It's always a little jarring when everything feels normal. And Ikehara's room is no different. The bed is made, everything on her dresser is lined up neatly, and the room is still bright from the late afternoon sun filtering through the breaks in the trees. There's no sign of a struggle or anything else to indicate that something unusual had happened, which supports Poe's theory that she hadn't been forced to take the poison. If Ikehara had been noticeably sick in the early afternoon, then she had been probably unknowingly taking the poison earlier in the day. With Toshio as his escort to make sure that no one is alone, Poe ducks out of Ikehara's room and checks the bathroom next door. The whole room is clean. Sink scrubbed, makeup organized, and towels folded, with the exception of a damp bath towel hanging over the shower rod. He checks the cabinet behind the mirror, and it doesn't look like the bottle of aspirin has been tampered with. The last stop in the kitchen, because Poe isn't the only one who noticed the convenient timing on the toaster fire. The Haradas swarm the counter in front of the appliance, scanning for hints beyond the charred remains of the napkins found in the toaster. Poe's mind turns back to the question of poison, and Ranpo joins him in opening all the cabinets, though Poe isn't completely convinced that Ranpo is searching for potential poison. After all, they hadn't eaten since this whole debacle started. Poe takes a cursory look in the fridge, and then nearly slips in a small puddle when he crushes to open the freezer underneath. The ice cubes are all frozen together, but otherwise, everything looks normal. So, Edogawa-san, Poe-san, Masahiro begins. If you come to any conclusions about the identity of the culprit, Stone says that he doesn't expect much from them. Part of that probably comes from his assumptions about his own superiority, but part of it is also probably due to the fact that Ranpo had pulled out the animal spotters guide from his backpack and is currently drawing little hats on all the animals. It definitely doesn't fit the atmosphere, though it's really adorable of him. We, have ideas, Poe hedges. It would probably be best, logically speaking, to sit down and go over the series of events from the beginning. You said that you've been playing cards, right, Oshiro-san? The man nods. Then everyone should take the same seats that they had so we can go over everything, starting with your arrival. Why should we? Toshio asked. We were here when it happened. It only benefits you and Edogawa-san to hear this. But you haven't figured out who it is yet, right? You might find something new if you hear it again. I doubt that, but I'm sure we'll still win if we go along with this. After that, everyone files out into the dining room and Ranpo, disconcertingly, takes the dead woman's seat. Poe's not sure where to stand and sours for a moment, but he eventually settles on leaning on the back of Ranpo's chair. Ranpo cranes his head around to look at Poe. Will you be offended if I get bored of all these people talking and tune out? Poe blinks. He's aware that Ranpo doesn't work with other detectives when he gets called out on cases for the Armed Detective Agency, so it hadn't occurred to him that Ranpo might take his feelings into account. His concern for Poe is touching, actually. Do whatever you want. Within reason, he asks quickly. Ranpo laughs. I'm always reasonable. He smiles at Poe, and Poe finds himself smiling back instead of disputing that plainly false statement. Ranpo holds Poe's gaze for a long moment, something warm in his expression, and Poe's face heats up for no reason that he'll admit. Toshio sighs, his head in his hands as an artful display of disinterest. Are you planning to start this anytime soon? Yes, maybe we should start with what time everyone got here, Poe ventures. I've been here all day, Natsumi says. Did your aunt do anything out of the ordinary? She laces her fingers together and looks at the stairs, thinking. I couldn't say for sure. She was upstairs for most of the morning to finish up on the guest rooms, but I was downstairs dusting and vacuuming. setting the table, opening all the curtains, and cleaning whatever else needed it. Okay, who got here first? Morita raised her hand. I did. But Kumiko-chan and I stayed at the dining room table the whole time with Natsumi-san. She can verify that if you don't believe me. Natsumi nods in assent. He was next, she says, looking over at Oshiro, and we caught up with each other at the table. The three of us were college friends. After her verbal error, Morita bites her lip and looks away. And despite her confirmed grudge against Ikehara, it's clear that she regrets the death of her friend. A few moments of silence pass before Fuyumi takes the narrative. We arrived last, she says. Toshio left the room to call our parents and let them know we'd arrived safely. We did introductions with the other guests since we knew Ikehara-san from work rather than school. She was an administrative assistant at one of the precincts we used to work with regularly, and when Masahiro had mentioned an interest in strategy games, they exchanged phone numbers. Her invitation last week was a surprise, since we don't work there anymore, and we hadn't known her that well when we did. I see, Poe says. Her answer is unusually clear and informative, but that makes sense, since she is probably used to taking witness statements during investigation. So what about after introductions? There's a pause, and Natsumi eventually replies, I think Morita-san broke the ice by opening up the snacks she brought. Oh my god, you did poison her, Oshiro breathes, eyes widening. She turned to Morita in the next seat. You baked her those gross cookies she loves, so no one else would eat them, and you killed her. It can't be the cookies, Ranpo says before Morita has time to do more than glare at Oshiro. I ate one on our way to the kitchen the first time, and I don't feel any different. Oh, Ranpo-kun, Poe sighs. What? Ikehara-san got a stomachache or something afterwards, right? But I feel fine. Poe opens his mouth and decides that the conversation about snacking at crime scenes can wait for another day. He looks back over the suspects. We've decided it's not the cookies then. What else did Ikehara-san eat? Natsumi hums. I don't remember everything that she had, but I know she had tea early on. Masahiro-san offered to make it for her. What? No, I didn't, Masahiro says, confused. When I came downstairs, Ikehara-san already had tea. Natsumi hums. I don't remember everything that she had, but I know she had tea early on. Masahiro-san offered to make it for her. What? No, I didn't, Masahiro says, confused. When I came downstairs, Ikehara-san already had tea. She looks at him disbelievingly. We all saw you. It was definitely you who made it, Oshiro confirms. At that point, Toshio was still on the phone. Fuyumi holds up a hand. This can be resolved easily. If we check the cup, we should be able to see if there was poison in it. If not, then this confusion doesn't matter. He looks over at Poe. Do the other investigators have a problem with this? Poe shakes his head. With that, Fuyumi pulls on a pair of latex gloves and brings out the teacup that Ikehara-san had been using. There's no tea left in the cup, but she runs a finger on the rim and sniffs it. I'd say it was cyanide, she declares. It smells like almonds. She offers the cup to Poe, who performs the same test and comes to the same conclusion. In the brief silence that follows, heads turn to Masahiro in suspicion. I didn't do it, he says again. 4 of us here watched you bring it to her, Oshiro points out. You're mistaken. And you're a killer. Alright, what happened next? Poe prompts, hoping to break up the brewing fight. Just being in contact with the cup doesn't make Masahiro the killer, and Poe wants to have the whole picture before drawing any conclusions. Oshiro is still eyeing Masahiro warily, but he drops the argument from now. After making Kumiko-chan's tea, I think he left for the bathroom. The rest of us started playing cards. Was that all of you? Not yet, Natsumi says. After the first hand, Toshio-san came back and sat down, and then Masahiro-san came back a couple hands later. No one got up for a while, until Masahiro-san got water from the kitchen for Fuyumi-san, Morita interrupts. She, like Oshiro, now seems to be suspicious of Masahiro. The problem with getting witness statements is that no matter what questions are asked, there are always some details left out or exaggerated based on the witness's perception. It's important to have that uncertainty in fiction, Poe has found, but it's really annoying to deal with in real cases. Natsumi waits to make sure that Morita is done before speaking again. So after that, 10 or 15 minutes later, maybe, I'm not sure, my aunt said she wasn't feeling well, and we agreed to take a break so she could lay down for a bit. What did you do while she was resting? I pulled up board games, and we put the TV on in the background. You got our Kumiko-chan's cake, Oshiro reminds her. She nods. It was too early for dinner, but people were hungry. She closed her eyes as if visualizing the scene. Fuyumi-san grabbed more plastic forks, and Oshiro-san ran to his car for the drinks he brought. Morita takes the opportunity to re-enter the conversation. We crowded in front of the television to eat, since Fuyumi-san noticed that the baseball game was tied in the last inning. Yes, and we were all together until Masahiro-san left to check on my aunt. Who closed the blinds? Ranpo asked suddenly. He's been doodling on a napkin for most of the conversation, so his non-sequitur gets everyone's attention, Poe's included. What? Why? Oshiro asked. Come on, Ranpo whines. Just tell me, who closed the blinds in the living room? It's not a hard question. I don't see why this is relevant either, Toshio says. It's not like Ikehara-san was found in the living room. She was outside the house. Wait, Natsumi says. The living room is right under my aunt's room. She frowns in concentration. I opened the blinds this morning. I remember it. Poe catches on instantly and gets to watch understanding dawn on everyone else. It's the window that the body would have passed by when the killer dropped it out of Ikehara's room, and it's visible from the dining room. The culprit would have needed the blinds closed. Masahiro closed the blinds, Fuyumi said quietly. I didn't! Fuyumi, what are you talking about? What's going on? Morita isn't very subtle about scooting her chair away from him. You were also the only one who went upstairs to check on Kumiko-chan, and you were alone in the kitchen for a few minutes just to get your sister a glass of water. How do we know you didn't start the fire? Masahiro scowled. I took a while in the kitchen because the ice was all stuck together in the tray, and I went upstairs because I was concerned because Ikehara-san had been up there for hours. Poe could see that all the guests now were convinced of Masahiro's guilt, but something doesn't feel quite right to him. First, if Poe ever planned a murder, he'd use his knowledge from old cases and mystery novels to keep from making the same mistakes that the culprits did. Masahiro, as someone who's worked on homicide cases for at least 5 years, would never have volunteered to go up and check on Ikehara if he was the one who killed her, because that would immediately place him under suspicion when the body was found. He would have stayed inside of witnesses the whole time. Second, the argument about Masahiro being alone in the kitchen means nothing. It doesn't take 5 minutes to stuff some napkins in the toaster and set it on low to create a delayed distraction. Third, Masahiro doesn't look like he's faking confusion. If you're going to point fingers at me for going into the kitchen, Masahiro says, then why not look at everyone who's been here? This is absurd, he pounds on the table for emphasis. One of the glasses near the edge of the table starts to fall, but by chance, Natsumi had already been reaching for her own cup, so she prevents the spill with relative ease. That was a good catch, Morita says. Thanks. I've always been really lucky with things like that, Natsumi says with a quick smile. And suddenly Poe understands. A girl surrounded by coincidence, old enough to understand the world, but young enough to be dismissed by her elders. Perfect for an underdog. And possessing a strong reason to see the culprit from this case face justice. It's not the Haradas who are the protagonists of this tale. It's Natsumi. She's been set up as the underdog. Someone who notices things and quietly remembers. Makes perfect sense. A set of triplet detectives is interesting as a concept, to be sure, but the Haradas come across as so standoffish, it's hard to like them as characters. Poe thinks about detectives who are underestimated. He thinks about the dirty towel in the shower rod that Ikehara or Natsumi would have thrown in the laundry before guests arrived, and a knowledge that no one else has mentioned. And he thinks about the ice cubes fused together, and water on the floor. He thinks about the purpose that identical siblings usually serve in fiction, and everything slots into place. Poe had been caught off guard because there were 3 of them. But this case is really just classic use of identical siblings in a mystery. I know you're not the culprit, Masahiro-san, Poe suddenly says, disrupting whatever conversation had erupted from the almost dropped glass. You've been framed. Who would do that? He demands. The criminals behind Ikehara-san's death. In the fire in the kitchen are your siblings, Toshio-san and Fuyumi-san. Over the cries of, that's outrageous, and please take this seriously, from around the table. Poe hears, I wanted to play too, from Ranpo, a pout forming on his face. There was just way too much talking. Can I tag in? Go ahead, Poe says. Ranpo flashes a brilliant smile that makes Poe's heart melt, and then turns to face the rest of the room. Since Pokon is my only real competition in the whole world, none of you really had a chance at winning the detective battle against us. To be fair, 2 of the detectives were the culprits, Poe points out, though he can feel his face turning scarlet at the compliment. Being considered Ranpo's equal is high praise. Ranpo waves that point away. Whatever, we won. I'll just put the rest of the pieces together since no one's going to admit that we won until everything is explained. He casually puts on his glasses, wipes them off with his shirt, and sets them on his face. Masahiro-san, he starts after activating super deduction. When you got here, you went to take a shower because something got accidentally spilled on your pants in the car. That's right. Hush, I wasn't asking. Poe covers up a snort with a cough at the insulted look Masahiro gives Ranpo. Judging by the glare Masahiro directs Poe's way shortly after, his reaction doesn't go unnoticed. Your siblings knew how long it would take you, so Toshio-san left the room on the pretense of calling home and changed into the same shirt you'd been wearing. Since Fuyumi-san acted like he was you, everyone else accepted that he was the real Masahiro-san. Poe pauses briefly to turn his gaze on Toshio, his usual air of immaturity replaced by the intent that's usually reserved for murder cases and reading the dessert menu. Toshio-san, you casually closed the blinds during introductions. It was you who offered to make the poison tea for Ikehara-san. You also poured tea from the tap into the ice tray to make all the ice cubes freeze together. You arranged it with Fuyumi-san beforehand, so that later when she said, I'm thirsty, Masahiro-san would go into the kitchen to get a glass for her, and then struggle with the ice tray. Natsumi sits up straighter in her seat. That's right. After you offered to get it for her, Fuyumi-san specifically asked for ice. After serving the tea, you said something about using the bathroom or whatever, and changed back into your own clothes. You sat down, and then Masahiro-san came down from his shower none the wiser. There had been a calculated chance, Poe knows, because if anyone had referenced Masahiro's presence during that time, the ruse would have been revealed. Maybe they would have played it off as a prank, but it would still look awfully suspicious once Ikehara-san was discovered. Perhaps there were contingency plans to hide their involvement that Poe hadn't worked out yet. Or perhaps there was more poison in the Hada's luggage than needed to kill one person. With that ominous thought in mind, it's possible that Moita's homemade cookies, which hadn't been subject to the Hada's influence, were in fact the least dangerous things Ranpo could have eaten from the table. Not that he plans on telling Ranpo that during their chat about safety at crime scene. Ranpo's voice drags Poe back from his internal tangent. Masahiro-san got Fuyumi-san her water, and then the poison started to work. So Ikehara-san went to her room where she died. Poe winces at Ranpo's bluntness. A couple hours went by. During dessert, Fuyumi-san volunteered to grab plastic forks from the kitchen and stuff some napkins in the toaster. Then, she called you all over to the TV, and while everyone was focused on the game, Toshio left to move Ikehara-san. There were more looks of realization from the other guests as they began to see how neatly everything had been planned. Next, she probably said something like, someone should go check on Ikehara-san, and knew that Masahiro-san would volunteer. If Pokon and I hadn't been discovered, Masahiro-san would have reported her missing. He came down right after the fire started and told us, Morita confirms. Why are people still talking? I'm not done yet, Ranpo frowns, but he barely pauses before launching back into his tale. Everyone would have checked the house first, and then eventually outside. And Ikehara-san would have been found right outside of her room. They needed it to look like Masahiro-san was the last one with her without actually giving him time alone to examine her remains. After he had moved her, Toshio-san hid in the linen closet or bathroom or whatever until Masahiro-san passed by, and then he joined you in the kitchen. With all the confusion of putting out the fire, you would have noticed one person missing. There, I'm done. Now you can talk. This is a thrilling story, Toshio says calmly. But you don't have any proof that any of this is true. I thought you were supposed to be a detective or something. You said you called home when we got here, didn't you? We just need to check your call history. There won't be one listed during that time, though, since you were disguised as Masahiro-san. That's not definitive. There could be a problem with the phone company. Ranpo scowls. Okay then, explain why you have a pair of gloves hidden down the back of your socks when they're covered by your pants. Or I could do it for you. You didn't have time to hide them in the house after moving Ikehara-san, and you couldn't keep them with your wallet and keys in case everyone agreed to turn out their pockets looking for evidence, so that was your only option. They should definitely be in your socks, and they should definitely still have traces of cyanide on them. What motive would they have for this? Masahiro asks, not looking at his brother and sister. It's obvious that he can see the logic in Ranpo's explanation, but it's harder to accept that his family might have planned to frame him for murder. I don't care. Poe rolls his eyes heavenward. It's traditional, he says, for great detectives to reveal the motive as well. They probably need to discover that in order to leave the story. Oh, fine. Masahiro-san, why don't you work at the same precinct as Ikehara-san anymore? Your sister was very adamant that you all had been cut off from her for a while. Masahiro-san's eyes widen and he turns to face Fuyumi and Toshio. No. You blame me for the Inspector's death. It was a shootout. They said there was nothing I could have done. His eyes filled with grief at the memory. Perhaps, Fuyumi said icily, if you hadn't been too distracted that day, arranging playdates for your little strategy games, you would have found a solution. Toshio and I thought of a dozen different ways you could have been saved if we were in your position. It's different in the moment, when everything is happening quickly, Masahiro said. You know that! How could you think that of me? With the case now completely solved, Black Cat and the room morgue began to whisk Poe and Ranpo away. Poe takes a moment to wonder what happens to the characters when he and Ranpo disappear. Something he has considered before in passing, but never fully explored in this experiment with his abilities. Do the original characters' personalities return? Are the two cyclists surprised to be in a room full of people rather than out on their trip? Can the other characters immediately perceive the difference? When his vision clears, Poe finds that they're in fact back at the table of contents instead of the real world. Ranpo does not say, I told you so, but the grin he shoots at Poe certainly implies it. Chapter 4. When Poe and Ranpo leave the table of contents this time, they step into an ornate lobby with high ceilings, chandeliers, polished marble columns, and trendy sofas. Ranpo wrinkles his nose. It's a little too fancy for his taste. There are people milling about with luggage in front of a large desk across the room. So this is probably an upscale hotel. Wow, Poe says. It's very glamorous. His gaze catches on the concierge desk. Since the characters we replaced probably came here for a reason, perhaps we should see if we have room? They approach the desk and wait in line until they're called. We have a reservation. It should be under either Poe or Edogawa. The desk clerk searches her list. Yes, I do have one here under Edogawa, and it looks like your luggage has already been taken up to the room. I'll need to see your information. The two search their pockets for IDs and printed confirmation emails from the hotel, and once they finish the check-in, the clerk hands them the 2 key cards. The detectives walk towards the elevators in silence, and Ranpo notices Poe blinking rapidly, like he's trying to keep his eyes open. Do you need a break? Maybe. I didn't sleep much last night, he said. And with all the running around for both cases, I'm feeling pretty drained. Plus, I haven't eaten. Ooh, I'm hungry too. I'll order room service, and you take a nap, and then we'll get to work. Poe smiles wearily. A bed sounds fantastic right now. The rest of the walk to the room is quiet. which Poe seems to appreciate. When they reach the right number, Ranpo slides his keycard through and steps in, scanning the room. Well, this is a surprise. If Ranpo had to guess, he'd say that their third mystery has a romantic subplot. It might be the bouquet of red roses on the desk that gives it away, or maybe the 2 wine glasses on the nightstand. Just a thought. It doesn't make sense, though. He and Poe have already had a supernatural mystery and a classic whodunit, so it's not unreasonable that they'd run into one with romance now. Poe is either too exhausted to notice these details, or he doesn't care, because he just drops his coat over one of the suitcases at random and crawls into the one bed in his room, pulling the covers over himself and sighing contentedly. Ranpo, now left to his own devices, makes a beeline to the desk with the room service menu. He picks out a few dishes that he and Poe both like and orders over the hotel phone. When he's done ordering, Ranpo pulls out the smartphone from his jacket and hops onto the bed next to Poe, propping up the pillow on the headboard and sliding his legs under the covers as he downloads the game. He considers taking a nap too, but one of them should be awake when the food gets here. Poe rolls over after Ranpo has beaten the first 2 levels, his breathing already evened out in sleep, and Ranpo finds himself pausing the game to look over. Poe's bangs are mussed right now, and Ranpo can see most of his face, a rarity even after all the time they've spent together. Ranpo has often thought that Poe should pin his hair back more often, and he wonders if it would fit into a little ponytail at this length. Without thinking, Ranpo reaches over to brush his friend's hair back completely, and he marvels, as he always does, when Poe falls asleep on his shoulder, at how soft his hair is. He combs his fingers through it, fascinated, and the warm, contented feeling that he gets around his closest friend fills him completely. And he just wants to bask in this unfamiliar, yet pleasant extension of his feelings towards Poe. So, instead of removing his hand, he continues to brush Poe's hair and set his phone on his lap to play Tetris one-handed. Everything is quiet except for the beeps and whistles from the game, until Ranpo's phone rings. He flinches at the unexpected sound. Who would be calling him here? Ranpo pulls off the covers and steps into the bathroom to answer the call, hoping that the ringing hadn't woken up Poe. Hello? Edogawa-san, it's me. Are you in a secure location? He looks at the tiled walls dubiously. Sure. As I said in our mission briefing, you're already registered for the conference under your alias. You just have to pick up your name badge and other materials at the conference check-in. You told your civilian cover that this trip is for business first, correct? Ah, so Ranpo and Poe's characters are a couple, at least on the surface. Oh, you know me, he says, rolling his eyes. Always playing the job first. Are you confident that he won't crash the conference to see you? If you think he's gotten too attached, end it now, and the agency can provide you a list of other potential covers after the mission. Ranpo frowns, offended on Poe's behalf, even though it isn't really Poe that the man is talking about. However, he's unwilling to give the stranger any reason to separate him from Poe, so he says, everything is fine. Let me know if that changes. Regarding the mission, all relevant files have been emailed to your phone, and I was told to relay to you that the director wants this taken care of as quickly as possible. Good luck. The man hangs up before Ranpo can ask any questions. Mission briefings, secure calls, aliases. I am a spy, Ranpo said to his reflection in the mirror. Ranpo pulls up the emails that his contact had mentioned and scrolls through them. He finds files containing information on 5 homicide victims, who had all separated almost exactly 1 year ago, going by the date on his phone. All 5 had gone missing over the course of 3 days from the convention hall attached to this hotel, and were later all found dead. Interestingly, the autopsies showed that despite being abducted separately, the time of death was estimated to be the same for all 5 victims. The fact that some super-secret spy agency is sending Ranpo in a whole year after the murders suggests that there will be more victims this year at the same conference. Ranpo closes up the files for now and exits the bathroom to find Poe awake and on the phone, looking serious. Yes, sir, I understand, Poe is saying. I won't let you down. Goodbye. He hangs up and looks over at Ranpo from the bed, eyes wide. I'm a spy, he announces. I'm a spy, Ranpo says. You're my cover, Poe starts to giggle. So we're both spies, leading each other as a cover. Do you think either of them knew? Ranpo asks as he begins to laugh too. Who knows? Spies from 2 different organizations. What are the chances? He gasps through fits of mirth. The conference trip and weekend vacation I invented to you is the perfect excuse for us both to be here. It takes them a few minutes to stop giggling. Finally, Poe wipes a tear from his eye and says, "We should probably start on the case then. What did your organization say to do?" "Dunno. There was a meeting about it before we got here. I just got the files of the victim." Poe's smile fades. It was the same for me. So neither of our organizations explicitly said what it is we're supposed to be doing here, right? Ranpo nods. Well, as detectives, that puts us in a bad spot. We're missing 2 of the principal characters of our investigation, and we don't know which side they would have played on. The spies might have been sent here to stop the murders, or maybe they were supposed to monitor the situation and help the culprits, or one of them could play for each side. I guess there's only one way to find out, Ranpo says with all the solemnity he can muster. Based on the puzzled look Poe gives him, his uncharacteristic seriousness does not go unnoticed. How? We'll just have to go through our luggage to find every single spy gadget at our disposal, he feigns a sigh. What a chore. Poe laughs. You're gonna have a lot of fun with this, aren't you? Ranpo lets a smile grow on his face. If there are explosives in one of those, I call dibs. They dump out the contents of both of their suitcases and sort through everything. The hard plastic case in Ranpo's bag has, among other things, a laptop and a pair of glasses. I bet the glasses suit lasers. Ranpo-kun, that's very unlikely. After picking through the bag's contents, they examine the suitcases themselves, feeling around the linings for any hidden surprises. Ranpo's contains a spare cell phone and a device that looks like a sleek compass, and Poe's yields a small zip bag of gadgets, included but not limited to what looks like an exploding pen. Poe, of course, does not let Ranpo keep the pen. We have no way of knowing what it's meant to do, Poe insists, tucking it back in the bag. But Poe-kun, the bag is full of spy gadgets. Knock on the door ends the conversation. But while Poe is talking to the gentleman delivering their food, Ranpo slips the pen into one of his pockets. For good measure, he also helps himself to some of the safety pins and rubber bands that they've found among Poe's things. He's seen enough spy movies to know that it's useful to have a few odds and ends to work with. He gives a handful of them to Poe when he returns with the food, and after Poe pockets the spy tools, they break for lunch. Or maybe, since it's 4:30, it's an early dinner. Whether or not our characters were meant to be good, we should probably go scope out the conference. Poe says when they're finished. It's Friday evening, so they must have something going on. The programs they get at the check-in say that the opening ceremonies will be starting at 5 p.m. So Poe and Ranpo make their way to one of the lecture halls in the convention center and find seats in the back. I think we're underdressed, Poe mutters, gesturing around at all the expensive suits and other professional attire. We're a little more business casual than they seem to be. We have ties on, they have ties on, it's fine. Everyone here does look pretty high profile, though, so maybe this business conference is more important than Ranpo had been thinking. These people all look like they're a big deal, Poe points out, unknowingly mirroring Ranpo's thoughts. Culprits must have wanted something from them, but from what my organization said, there weren't any transactions on the victims' bank accounts after they went missing. The abductions weren't for ransom money. After a quick look around to make sure that no one's sitting close enough to peek over his shoulder, Ranpo pulls out his phone and opens up the case files again. Ranpo's spy agency, whoever they are, has included the official and unofficial notes from the police investigation from the last year. Their primary suspect had been the main coordinator of the events, Adachi Jiro, who, Ranpo takes a moment to check the conference program, is currently on stage giving opening remarks. He nudges Poe to look at his phone. Look, police think this guy's the one who did it. Taking out his competition, huh? Poe says, scanning the text. Looks like he had the most to gain from these victims being out of the industry. Yeah, too bad Adachi-san was seen at the conference when the victims disappeared. The opening ceremonies are boring, which is to say that no one throws open the doors to dramatically declare that some VIP has gone missing. The program says there is a cocktail hour starting right after, so Poe drags Ranpo back up to the room to change. We can't go like this, Ranpo-kun. We'll attract too much attention. Ranpo whines, but eventually accepts the clothes that Poe shoves into his arms. When Ranpo leaves the bathroom, Poe is in front of the mirror, buttoning his waistcoat. Hey, Poe-kun, do you know how to tie a bow tie? Mm-hmm, he replies distractedly. Can you tie mine? Poe looks Ranpo up and down, his face flushing red. Yes, I can do that. He swallows and accepts the bow tie from Ranpo, stepping him closer until they're almost touching. Poe's hands shake as he loops the tie around Ranpo's neck and begins to knot it. But before Poe can succumb to whatever worry is plaguing him at the moment, Ranpo scuffs around for something to distract him. Those clothes, you could say that they suit you. What a charmer, Poe deadpans, though his face is starting to turn red again. The cocktail hour also starts out boring, since being in fancy clothes means that Ranpo's not allowed to climb onto the tall potted plants to get a better view of the room. There are lots of appetizers out, though, which is a plus. He and Poe circle the room before finding a spot near one of the drink tables, where they can get a good look at the majority of the guests. Poe nudges him when Adachi enters, but otherwise the two of them just watch for a while. Most of the conversation around them is small talk and networking, with only the occasional disturbance. There's a small group bickering about portfolio something or others at one of the nearby tables, and there's a tall woman by the appetizers arguing with a man whose suit jacket is the ugliest shade of green that Ranpo's ever seen. It's almost offensive. Poe taps him on the shoulder. Maybe you should just do another lap around the room. It would, of course, be easier to just ask people if they were here last year when the abductions occurred, but I hate for us to get arrested as suspicious figures who are here representing fake companies. They wander around for a while, but unfortunately don't hear anything of interest. Poe's just about to suggest that they leave when there's a commotion near the door. Two bulky gentlemen who look like bodyguards are talking to a well-dressed woman with a clipboard who's relaying their words into her walkie-talkie. The men are obviously agitated, but they keep looking around the room for something. Someone, maybe. You think? Someone says nearby. It started again, hasn't it? My wife's going to worry terribly. I told her that they'd increase security so nothing would happen this year, but those two were here with Terada-san. Another person murmurs to Ranpo's left. Poe scoots over to them. Did you say Terada-san? I didn't, see him here tonight. Are you sure? Oh, yes. He was here, wearing an olive suit today. Couldn't miss him. Oh, the man with the ugly green jacket. Ranpo looks back over at the table where he'd seen him, but there's no one sitting there anymore. Pokon, Ranpo says, tugging his friend closer. He was arguing with a woman earlier at one of the tables, and his bodyguards weren't around. He'd probably make a better culprit than Adachi-san. Poe agrees. It's an obvious choice, since his potential motive is well known, but that makes him kind of boring as a mystery antagonist. It's no fun if even the characters can guess from the beginning. You know what spies would do? They would look at the security footage. Poe pulls out his phone. The conference map may not have the security center labeled, but I'll bet that my copy of the blueprints does. They casually leave the room and stroll towards the dot on Poe's map, pausing occasionally to admire the bland wall art to avoid suspicion as they get closer to their destination. When the two of them reach a door that requires a key code, they get lucky. A man leaving the employee-only area tentatively responds to Ranpo's energetic wave and holds the door open for them. Works like a charm, Ranpo explains cheerfully once they're through. People get embarrassed when they don't recognize co-workers, so they don't ask to see ID. I feel like I shouldn't ask you how you've used this knowledge before, Poe replies. Honestly, Ranpo only uses it as a zoo to pet animals outside of scheduled visitor events, but he leaves the answer up to Poe's imagination. The security booth is clearly labeled, and a quick look through the open door reveals that a woman in an expensive suit is standing just outside the door with her arms crossed. Poe gestures to the darkened room immediately next to the booth, and Ranpo nods. They slip into the room and leave the door open enough to hear the security guard next door. And like I said, when the officer stopped by doing the investigation, there was nothing more I could have done. Last year at this time, there were updates being installed on the security system, so some of the cameras were down when the victims went missing. Unfortunately, we didn't catch any of the abductions on the ones that were functional. And what about during the last hour, Isoba-san? When another conference attendee may have disappeared, the woman asked. And the police won't get involved until Terada-san has been missing for a day, but we cannot afford another public investigation. There was a technical difficulty that was mentioned in my report on Wednesday, ma'am, and some of the camera batteries might not have been replaced yet by B-Team. That's too much of a coincidence, even for fiction, Poe says. The cameras just happened to be out during every single disappearance, and no one thought to investigate the security officers before asking for the recordings? I was writing more believable stories in high school. And let's check the staff logs to see who was supposed to be working these days. Oh, it was definitely him. Isobe-san, that is. This whole story smacks of sabotage, and any half-decent security guard would know it. Plus, we heard his name, and characters are more likely to get named if they're important to the plot. Before he can answer, Ranpo suddenly hears footsteps in the hallway, and he backs further into the room with Poe. The footsteps stop outside of the door, and Poe pulls him behind a vaguely rectangular shape. It's hard to tell what it is with minimal lighting. The room doesn't stay dark for long, though, if someone pushes the door open further and lets in more light, revealing the room contains wires and computer servers, and other technical things that Ranpo doesn't recognize. Whoever opened the door pauses, probably scanning the room, but pulling it shut behind them, plunging the room in complete darkness. A lock clicks ominously. That doesn't sound good, Poe says. Ranpo hears Poe moving toward the door and then blinks when he flips the lights on. Oh, wait! And the lights immediately go back off. What are there cameras in here? That seems a little unsafe, Poe comments. A room right next to the security office full of technology that's probably related to the security system and it has no cameras in it? A perfect spot for sneaking snacking on the job. Poe stands up straighter. Or a perfect spot to hide a couple of people. That too, I guess. It makes sense that Isobe-san would want to keep his victims inside the convention hall. If he left with them, he'd have to worry about traffic cameras or other outside security that might get video evidence. He wouldn't even need to use the elevators to take his victims, either struggling or unconscious, to a hotel room. Poe rubs his chin. I wonder how many spots like this there are in the convention hall. Who knows? We'll never get out of here and plan our next spy strategy over dinner. I saw flyers for a cool-looking restaurant in the hotel, but we're locked in here with no tools. Ranpo pulls out a few safety pins. Have you never seen a spy movie, Pokon? I know exactly what to do. Oh, well in that case, please teach me your ways, Poe says, but he's smiling too fondly to really pull off the mocking tone. True to fictional standards, the lock yields under his safety pins within a few minutes, and the two of them leave the restricted hallway. While Poe calls his spy contact about getting a map with the security cameras marked, Ranpo gets them a table at the fancy restaurant on the top floor of the hotel, since it's not really his own money he'll be spending. Plus, Ranpo's pretty sure that the secret agent would be able to spring for a big dinner anyways. When Poe settles into the seat across from him after his call, Ranpo glances around. Lowering his voice, he says, Have you thought about what we're going to do when we get out of this book? Poe's expression turned grim. I haven't thought about that yet, but you're right to consider it. We might leave the confines of this book only to find that we're in a secured facility or surrounded by enemies. Exactly. I had my phone with me, but I don't know if they'll have someone watching us. True. Our greatest advantage is probably that we're going to leave the book before they're expecting us. With no other information, we might just have to play it by ear. Yeah, That's what Ranpo had thought too. The rest of their dinner is spent outlining a few potential scenarios, but most of their plans rely on being able to contact the Armed Detective Agency. Back in their hotel room, they open up the convention center blueprints on the laptop, and Poe scrolls through his copies of the police reports on the bed. It's a lot of information. We have to compare the witness reports of where the victims were last seen with the areas that were empty enough that someone could be attacked without notice. We also need to pin down which rooms are under minimal surveillance and conveniently located near where people went missing. Ranpo unfolds his possibly laser-equipped glasses. I can speed this up, he says. Sure, go for it. Poe scoots over with his laptop to make room on the bed, and Ranpo looks over the map as he activates super deduction. The information flashes through his mind and sorts itself into understandable patterns. There are 2 spots on this map that are the most likely based on all the data. Let's go check them out. It'll be as easy as... Don't say that, Poe breaks in, easily covering Ranpo's mouth. I don't wish to tempt fate by invoking that cliche, especially when fate needs to move the story along. Ranpo's train of thought vanishes like smoke at the touch of Poe's fingers to his lips. It's not a sensation that he's used to, from Poe or from anyone. His fingertips are warm, and there's a light pressure on Ranpo's skin, and he's surprised to find that the pressure is a pleasant one. He wonders if they would feel the same on his tongue. If it's just his lips that are sensitive like this, and he can only imagine that this foreign warmth would be even better with both of their lips involved. What would it feel like if Ranpo met Poe's mouth with his own? We can go, but carefully, Poe says, bringing Ranpo back to the present, and Ranpo nearly leans forward when Poe drags his hands away. He exhales and pushes his ponderings to the back of his mind for now. They have more important things to worry about, like the current mystery and the upcoming attack on the agency. The first door doesn't yield to safety pins, and there's really only so long they can stand there, obviously trying to pick the lock before someone else comes by. When it does happen, they pretend to argue about whether they're in the right spot for an event until the hallway is empty again. It's time for the laser glasses, Ranpo says. They're not laser glasses. You don't know that. But if there were laser glasses, Ranpo can't find the switch to turn the lasers on, so they don't help Ranpo and Poe get inside. While Poe watches for other people coming down the hallway, Ranpo pulls out the potentially explosive pen and twists the end experimentally to see if he can maybe pull out a tiny bomb casing and prove that it's not just an ordinary writing utensil. There's a brief sting, and blood wells up on the tip of his finger. Ow! He wipes the blood on a tissue and then shoves the pen into a back pocket so he doesn't stab himself with it again. Let's try the other door, Poe says, not appearing to have heard him. We've been here for a while and I'm starting to get uneasy. I'm sure there's a hardware store around here somewhere with tension wrenches and lockpicks, and we can try this one again later. Oh, where was his expertise when we were locked inside the server room? I know how to use the proper tools, not safety pins, Ranpo grins. I feel like I should never asked how you used this knowledge before. It was research for a story, alright. I needed to know how. Oh, I see. You're giving me a hard time. Yeah, but you like me anyways. Well, Poe stutters, turning scarlet. Let's go find some tools. After trying the second door too, they stop at the restrooms on their way back to the more populated area of the hotel. Ranpo searches local hardware stores on his phone while he waits for Poe outside. There's one within walking distance, but they'll have to book it over there if they wanted to make it before closing. Ranpo's not really paying attention to his surroundings in the alcove where the restrooms are, so when he finally looks up and sees the man in security uniform wearing a name tag that says Isobe Hideaki, it's too late for him to do anything. He breathes in to shout for help, but Isobe already has a cloth over his mouth, and yep, that's probably chloroform. Ranpo's last thought before succumbing to unconsciousness is that at least Poe is safe for the moment. When the world swims back into focus, Ranpo finds himself sitting across from Isobe in a dimly lit room with tables facing a projector screen. Ranpo, to his surprise, is not gagged, though his hands are bound behind his back. Who sent you? Isobe asks. And know that if you try to call for help, I'll kill you immediately and go get the answers out of your friend instead. Ranpo decides to focus on distracting the villain rather than the implied threat to Poe. He wouldn't be able to think clearly if he gets angry here. And if he manages to turn the tables now, then he wouldn't need to worry about the culprit getting his hands on Poe. He decides to feign ignorance. What's going on? I wasn't looking for a security guard. Don't play dumb. I saw the two of you snooping out of the room with my targets, and this room, my backup. Crap. Of course the security guard would be able to see them. Cameras are probably just fine, except when Isobe needs them to be broken. Ranpo shifts his bound hands and remembers the pen in his back pocket. He needed to keep Isobe talking. Why are you doing this? I am asking the questions, Edogawa-san. Is it supposed to be impressive or something that you know who I am? I've got an ID in my pocket and reserved a hotel room under my name. As subtly as possible, he begins sawing at the ropes around his hands with the blade that had been hidden inside the pen instead of a bomb. He feels like a real spy. I doubt that's your real name, just like I doubt that you're really here for the conference. Okay, fine, it was an excuse to go on a romantic vacation. Girl says one bed, the whole deal. He takes a second to realize that the plot elements they've hit are actually pretty typical for a story with romance. They've shared a bed, pretending to be dating, When locked in a dark room with no cameras and discussed escape plans for his fancy dinner. All things that could have led to emotional scenes between two people who started to fall for each other. Oh, that's what this feeling in his chest means. It's different than the kind of affection he feels for other people in his life. Ranpoe is surprised to find that he wants the casual touching that Poe has cultivated between them, and he wants the sense of partnership that this adventure has created. Yes, he likes the idea of being the person who's always on Poe's side. And Ranpoe doesn't just wish for Poe's happiness, he also wants to be the person who makes Poe happy. It's a new feeling for Ranpoe, and it fits with everything that they've built between them since Poe abandoned his revenge and became Ranpoe's friend. I tire of your lies, spy. Ah, right. He's still in the enemy's clutches. Ranpoe reluctantly drags his thoughts back to the previous conversation. What had they been talking about? Oh, right. Ranpoe's purpose at the convention center. Time to turn the question around. So why are you interested in the conference? It sounds like it wasn't just for fun or to get ransom money from your victims. Oh, it was much more clever than that. It was a work of my own genius. Looks like Ranpoe's got him talking now. Starts working on the ropes again. Each of my targets had access to information about cutting-edge technologies that hadn't been tested yet. The works wouldn't have been presented at the conference, but they were close enough that a few high-competent engineers in my pay could fill in the blanks. Once I had the schematics for all 5 technologies, I combined them into one grand project of my own design and sold the plans on the black market. So it was greed. What a boring reason. If you made lots of money, why are you still here? I realized how easy it was to make this kind of money. I stayed so that when the conference came back here, I could create something even better out of the newest innovations. Ranpoe's almost free, so he tries to extend Isabe's monologue. You didn't need to kill everyone, though. What gives? That was simply a mistake of an experience. They were captive in a soundproof room, but in neglecting to gag them, I unknowingly allowed them to begin talking to each other until they put together my idea. After that, of course, I couldn't allow them to combine the plans themselves, so I had to eliminate everyone who knew. Isabe leans forward and steeples his fingers at the same moment that Ranpoe feels the rope give completely under the blade, which brings us back to you. Were you hired by one of the heavy hitters at the conference, or is an outside party interested in my work? Well, Isabe-san, the only thing I'm allowed to say about that is... Exploding pen! He chucks the pen in the culprit's direction, and Isabe is flew long enough for Ranpoe to make a break for the door. He fumbles with the lock and then shoves the door open, tearing down the hallway and scrambling around the corner and running straight into Poe. Thank goodness! Poe exclaims, immediately engulfing him in an embrace. Hello, yes, I'm fine, but shouldn't we be running from the confirmed murderer? I called the police once I realized you had wandered off on your own. Forensic squad is scouring the room where we rescued Terada-san, looking for evidence of last year's crimes, and half the police officers are up in the security booth. The rest of them are blocking off escape routes and closing in on Isabe's location now. As if on cue, 2 officers pass them and round the corner. Ranpoe lets himself relax in Poe's arms. Cool. Any chance you figured out his motive? Oh yeah, I grilled him real good. He admitted to kidnapping his targets to make money, and then killed them when they figured out his big plan. You'd have seen my awesome interrogation skills. Ranpoe decides that when they have more time to recount their experiences fully, he'll make sure to mention that the spy pen had saved the day, if not in as volatile a manner as Ranpoe would have wanted. When the police barged in and took over the security booth, I figured out where the unaltered taste must be hidden. So, between the 2 of us, we covered the whole case. Nice, good teamwork. Yeah, Poe says Shelly. We do make a pretty good team, don't we? Poe thinks about his revelation in the interrogation room, and his heart softens. But before he can speak, the wind picks up around them, and Poe pulls him in closer as Black Cat in the room war carries him away. Chapter 5. The instant Poe and Ranpo reappear in the real world, everything screeches to a stop, and Poe feels himself being thrown forward. Jesus, said the woman in the driver's seat, who just swerved and slammed on the brakes. Oh, they're in a car. Carol said it would take 24 hours at least. What the hell are you people? Poe sees Ranpo on the far seat, and the anthology on the floor between them, and a quick look outside shows that they're in a city, but maybe not Yokohama. He hasn't lived in Japan that long, so it's hard to tell. It quickly becomes clear that the only reason neither of them had been heard when the woman hit the brakes is that they're still on slower, crowded streets, though apparently pulled off to the side now. He figures that it will only be a moment before the woman realizes that the only way to prevent them from leaving is to engage the child lock on the doors or to start driving again. So he reaches around Ranpo to unlock the door towards the sidewalk and give Ranpo a push. Ranpo takes the hint and stumbles out of the car, and Poe has the presence of mind to snatch the woman's phone from the passenger seat before tumbling out after him. Ranpo grabs his hand and they run. Fingers crossed that she doesn't have a combat ability. Poe pulls them to a halt when they're 2 blocks away. We have a brief window where we are ahead of whatever enemy group this is. And before she can get to another phone and inform her organizations, we need to let the Armed Detective Agency know what's happening. Ranpo pulls out his own phone and puts the call on speaker when it connects. Konakita-kun, it's Ranpo. Is everyone alright there? We're fine. Is there a reason we shouldn't be? Poe-kun and I got taken captive by a group claiming to be enemies of the Armed Detective Agency, but we're out of trouble for the moment. If Ranpo-kun was the first target, Poe points out, then Dazai-san might be next. They wanted Ranpo-kun out of the way well before the attack happened so that he couldn't help the agency plan. They knew a lot about him, so your other primary strategist might be the logical target too. Dazai-san is out of town with Kyoka-san on another mission. Kunigita informs them. Then they hear, Kenji-kun, call Dazai-san and make sure that the two of them are safe. There might be trouble headed their way. While they wait to hear from Dazai, Poe and Ranpo walk to the nearest station and outline to Kunigita what had happened to them. Do you have any ideas while you were in there? Kunigita asks when they finish their tale. At this point, they're about halfway back to Yokohama, and Kenji has confirmed that Dazai and Kyoka are safely on their way home, though they'd had to dodge an attack of their own. Only about escaping our captors, Ranpo admits cheerily, glasses now perched on his nose. But I think Poe-kun might have accidentally solved our problems. Poe blinks down at him. How's that? She took her phone so she couldn't call for backup, right? Poe nods. Well, she probably only had it out while she was driving so that she could use the GPS. And if we look through her previous destinations, she may have the headquarters programmed in. Kunigita finishes. Good job, Poe-san. Poe-san flushes. I wasn't thinking that deeply about it, but thank you. Ranpo frowns. Don't sell yourself short. You grabbed it to keep us one step ahead, and we are. His face heats up even more. Says thanks. After Ranpo promises to email the information that they dig up from the woman's phone, Kunigita hangs up to coordinate with the other agency members. Poe and Ranpo get to work, writing down the addresses on whatever scraps of paper Poe has on him, and borrowing a map from the Joyce family sitting next to them on the train. Besides the most recently set destination, all of the addresses are in Yokohama, which makes things simpler. They really want you gone, Poe realizes. They didn't only trap you, they thought that you needed to be in a different city when the attack happened. I guess you should be flattered. Poe waves the thought away. It's only natural that I would get to go this far, since I'm the agency's greatest detective. He studies the map for a few moments longer before pointing at one of the penciled in points on the map. That one's the headquarters. It's the most central and it's large enough to be a base of operations. Ranpo looks up from the map to meet Poe's gaze, and he places one hand on top of Poe's, suddenly very serious. It's going to be dangerous, Poe-kun. You're not one of their main targets, so if you don't want to go, I understand. If you want to, though, you're welcome to join us. I'm coming with you, Poe asserts. He has no problem with turning the tables on the ability stealer, and he'll bring out his most horrifying twisted mysteries. That's my Poe-kun. Yours, Poe agrees, a little more fierce than he'd meant to be, but after a flash of surprise, Ranpo looks pleased. Ranpo breaks their little staring contest to look down his phone. I've got an idea about how to overtake them. We should let Kunigita-kun know. After swinging by Poe's apartment to check on Carl and pick up some volumes of Poe's work, they head out to meet up with the rest of the armed detective agency. Normally, the agency would wait for attackers to come to them at the office, but since this organization could have anywhere from a few to a few hundred members, and half of any battle is knowing more about your opponents, they'd evacuated. Tanizaki had covered their exit with illusions in case the office was being watched. Once everyone else had left, they'd gathered at a public park on the other side of the city. When everyone is assembled, Fukuzawa nods at Ranpo, who takes the lead. Since they're planning to attack the armed detective agency, their headquarters should be conveniently empty of the members with the best combat ability. If we infiltrate their base before they know we're onto them, we can determine what they want, how much they know about us, and what weaknesses their combative members have. Don't they know by now that you and Poe-san escaped? Atsushi asks. Oh, yes, for sure. But Tanizaki-kun's illusions are still in place, and though these new enemies are definitely a dangerous group, we've already proven twice that our abilities exceed their expectations of us. Despite everything they know about Dazai-san and me, they still underestimated us when they picked their agents, and they're likely to do so again. 30 minutes later, though, Poe is not feeling underestimated. Ranpo-kun, move! He shouts, as another fiery projectile careens in their direction. Ranpo, who's busy fiddling with his glasses to find out which direction they should take next, doesn't seem to hear him, so Poe grabs him by the collar and yanks him behind an overturned desk. The infiltration had sounded so easy when Ranpo had explained everything to the group. The basics of the plan are to split into groups, he just said. The office ladies will go to one of the hideouts we haven't used yet, and the president and Yosono-san are going to wait outside the enemy base. There had been several nods at this, and Poe had remembered that healing abilities were rare. It made sense to have the president with her. There will be two teams who are going to enter the hideout. Atsushi-kun will be in the group with Poe-kun and me, and Kenji-kun and Kunigita-kun will be with the other team. You're going to attack? Yosono had asked, looking Ranpo up and down skeptically. Well, not attack so much as to track down information. The goal tonight is to find their files and to restrain a few members as proof for their special abilities department to get their help with the rest. Once we get to the hideout, Tanizaki-kun is going to drop the illusions and head over to join Kenji-kun and Kunigita-kun's team for distraction. On the off chance that Kyoka-chan and Dazai-san get back in time, they'll join the others. Poe's memory is interrupted by the crackle of another fireball. She is doing a fabulous job of keeping the most aggressive opponents busy, but they had stumbled upon a whole posse of enemies sneaking through the corridor, and two of the enemies had focused on Poe and Ranpo. Poe curses under his breath and looks around for something that he can use to change the situation. He can't get close enough to trap their opponents inside a book, so he'll have to try another strategy. If only he had time to think. to the door further down the wall, and a quick look shows that there's enough cover that Poe and Ranpo could probably get there without being burnt to a crisp. The door is metal, not wood, so they might be able to collect themselves and come up with a plan. Of course, there's also the chance that the door will lead to a dead end, but at this point, they can't move forward, and they won't make it back the way they came, so this third option is their only decent shot. Poe taps Ranpo on the shoulder and points him to the door, and Ranpo nods. On 3, they make a dash for the door, keeping their heads low as another fireball just misses them. Poe pulls the door shut behind them and realizes that, both fortunately and unfortunately, they stumbled onto the armory, or at least an equipment room with a lot of weapons. He spends a few precious seconds trying to engage the complex lock, to no avail, and then they make it 10 steps into one of the long aisles before the fire ability user throws the door open with his co-worker beside him. The fire user flips the light switch off, leaving only the paltry emergency light, and says, "Stoker, you circle around to the left and get behind them. I'll take them head on." "Any ideas?" Poe whispers. Ranpo turns to one of the tables in the aisle. "This will do nicely," he declares, twisting one of the knobs on the large tank connected to a hose, but to what looks like a supersized squirt gun. "Wait, is that a flamethrower, Ranpo-kun? Fire is part of his ability that's not going to stop." Ranpo flips the ignition switch and pulls the front trigger to start a spark, and then points the gun up. Eyes gleaming, he pulls the fuel release trigger, and a column of flame shoots into the air. Poe is so shocked that he can't even begin to form an admonishment, and before he recovers enough to speak, a fire alarm starts to blare and the sprinklers turn on, drenching them both. Ranpo's grin widens, and he gestures to the fire user, who's swearing viciously and trying in vain to conjure a flame by snapping his fingers. "And that, Poe-kun, is how you fight fire with fire." "You're brilliant," is the only sentence Poe can get out that doesn't contain the phrase, "I love you." "I know." Poe is about to say more, but the reality of their situation snaps back into focus as another ability user, Stoker, appears out of thin air beside the fire user. "Are you all right, Bradbury?" "I'm unharmed. You can take these two out while I go dry off." Stoker nods and then dissolves into mist. Poe gives Ranpo a gentle push, and they head further into the armory, eyes peeled for Stoker to reappear. Poe feels something cold brush across his skin, and he shivers. A few moments later, a thick fog appears in front of them, and Stoker fizzles back into existence, pulling a sword off the wall. "Back towards the door," Ranpo directs, but once they've turned around to scramble towards the exit, Poe feels the chill again before Stoker solidifies, and he's still got the sword. This man's ability, unfortunately, doesn't have a conveniently obvious foil, and Poe doesn't have any intel on the organization's ability users. Had he shown any weaknesses earlier? Poe reviews everything that their two opponents have done since the start of the fight, separated from the rest of the group, cut off Poe and Ranpo's means of escape, knowingly followed two intruders into the armory, and then immediately turned off the lights. What had prompted Bradbury to do that? It wasn't to put Poe and Ranpo at a disadvantage, since they would have had an easier time hiding in the dark, and Bradbury would have quickly given away his position because of fire. Tactically, it didn't make any sense unless there's an advantage for Stoker in the dark. That's it. Poe whips his head around to find something that he can use, spots a floodlight on a table 3 aisles over. "When he moves to follow me," Poe murmurs, "head for the light switch." Ranpo doesn't question him, just nods, and before he can talk himself out of it, Poe pulls himself up onto the closest table. Stoker, not expecting this, blinks in confusion, and Poe takes a moment to get a head start. He steps over the equipment on the table and makes the jump over the aisle to the next table, praying that he doesn't accidentally amputate a toe with all the weapons he's stepping on. Poe mistimes the last jump and staggers onto the table, momentum almost carrying him over the side, but he lunges for the on switch and crosses his fingers that there's some battery backup in place and that he hasn't just risked everything for a weapon that's unplugged. Poe must use a month's worth of good luck in that moment, because not only does the floodlight snap on, he's timed perfectly with Ranpo's movements, and the overhead lights come on as well. Stoker's angry screech confirms that he's weak to bright lights, and Poe leaps down off the table and dashes towards the door, where Ranpo is waiting for him. After that interaction, the two bookish enemies in the base's headquarters pose almost no challenge. Poe feels bad as he tucks the book that they're trapped in back into his coat, but it had to be done. He stands next to the chair that Ranpo had taken in order to access what seems to be the main computer. A password screen appears when Ranpo jiggles the mouse, but he just plugs in the external hard drive that Kunikita had brought from the agency and thumbs through the contents of the desk. There's a post-it note taped to the bottom of the drawer, and Ranpo grins. After he keys in the phrase from the post-it to log in, the computer recognizes the new hard drive and automatically opens the backup program. Ranpo gleefully downloads everything onto the new hard drive and then sends a virus into their network to wipe all their data. It'll spread to any external backups when anyone tries to upload their own information here. He informs Poe with relish. They'll need months to restore any sort of order to their organization. Poe is suddenly very glad he's never actually been on Ranpo's bad side. They leave the central room as quickly as they'd come, now retracing their steps to pick up Atsushi. Miraculously, he's still in the same room where they'd left him, and a quick look around shows that the agency's distraction squad had joined him. Judging by the number of unconscious opponents strewn across the room, they seem to be waiting for the moment. But the heavy hitters who'd been sent to attack the agency are probably back by now. Poe's eyes lock onto the familiar figure of the ability stealer, who's probably the Carol that the driver had mentioned, just as Atsushi drops down from an ability-powered jumps and pins him to the ground. Wait, Atsushi-san, don't let him touch you. Carol's arms shift until they're covered in fur, and he elbows Atsushi in the gut with supernatural strength, sending the surprised boy flying backwards. Carol leaps to his feet and shifts his arms back, drawing the same knife he threatened to Poe with before. And he charges forward with the tiger speed towards the closest agency member, which, because he'd broken away to check on Atsushi, is Ranpo. Poe is exhausted from their adventures, tense with anxiety from sneaking around an enemy base, and out of his element in every way imaginable, but all other emotions pale in comparison to the sheer terror that floods him at the threat to Ranpo's safety. Atsushi is still getting his breath back, and the others haven't noticed Carol, so it's up to Poe to act. And though he's no less afraid than he has been during the whole mission, he does the only thing he can think of to bring Carol back to normal: human limits. He runs with everything he has left to intercept Carol and grabs the bare skin of his wrist. Carol staggers as he loses the speed from Atsushi's tigers, and then Poe's momentum sends them both tumbling to the ground. Then Poe realizes their position, and he scrambles to pin Carol's arms down. But before he can properly regain his balance, Carol socks him in the gut and rolls him aside. Ow. So that's what it's like to get the wind knocked out of him. Poe has written about characters getting into physical fights, but he's definitely not cut out for it himself. While Poe is recovering his breath, Carol gets to his knees and searches the ground. The two of them spot his knife at the same time, and Poe kicks out with one foot to send it spinning across the floor. Carol springs to his feet to follow its path, with Poe lurching to his feet behind him. Poe, unfortunately, has no martial arts experience, so when he manages to catch up, he just aims a kick at the back of Carol's knees and hopes for the best. To his surprise, the kick connects, and after Carol sprawls forward, Poe drops on top of him and grabs his wrists. Poe calculates that he doesn't have much time before his brief advantage of being taller and heavier is overcome by Carol's superior skill, so he twists his head around to enlist the only agency member who's not currently winded or fighting someone. Ranpo-kun, I could use a hand! Ranpo's head snaps up from examining Atsushi, who's already looking better than he had a few moments ago, and he rushes over. What do you need? Quickly, my left inside pocket, Poe directs, and when Ranpo pulls out a book, his expression clears in understanding. He hurriedly opens it to the first page and holds it in front of Carol's face. Carol flinches away, obviously understanding what they're trying to do, but Ranpo forces Carol's head forward, and his eyes focus on the words for just a moment. It lasts long enough for Poe to activate his ability, and then Carol is promptly sucked into the book, leaving Poe sitting uncomfortably on the floor. Around them, the battle continues to rage, but for Poe, this feels like a victory. Ranpo offers a hand to help Poe up, and he tiredly takes it. We should leave and let the president know we were successful. After signaling the other agency members started withdrawing, the two of them meet up with Yoshino and Fukazawa outside of the base, and they retreat to the armed detective agency. The moment that the hard drive is safe inside the folds of Fukazawa's coat, Ranpo turns to Poe. Are you alright? He asks. You're not usually the one for hand-to-hand combat. I may need to sleep for a whole day, but I'll live, Poe answers. Me too. Out of the blue, he steps forward and wraps his arms around Poe, burying his head into Poe's shoulder. I'm glad you're safe, he murmurs. Poe automatically returns the embrace, and his whole body feels like it's melting. While Ranpo does occasionally take Poe's hand on his own, Poe can't remember him ever being the one to initiate a hug. He finds that being on this end of the exchange is deeply satisfying, and that the world feels a bit softer. He leans his head on Ranpo's and closes his eyes, forgetting everything except the man in his arms. You don't usually do this, Poe comments softly. Ranpo must have been more worried during the raid than he'd let on. I've been warming up to it for the past few months. He leans back to look directly at Poe. You mind if I do it more? Poe's heart feels light. Not at all. It's different when we do things like this, Ranpo states. If it's with other people, I don't care either way, but with you, I like it. Despite his overwhelming fatigue, Poe's pulse starts to pound. He picks his words carefully. It sounds to me like you're seeing me differently than you do other people. He pauses, but Ranpo doesn't refute the statement, so Poe continues. If that's not just because we're friends, or because I'm your greatest challenger as a detective, then we could try something different. We could be... Poe knows that he can't get the words lovers out without stumbling because it sounds too bold, and he almost chickens out and goes with partners, because it's ambiguous enough to be either platonic or romantic. But at the last seconds, he perseveres. We could be a pair, if you want, romantically. Ranpo studies him for a moment. And that would make you happy too, right? I would be happy, Poe confirms, blushing. Exceedingly happy. Ecstatic. Then let's go for it. He steps back from the hug. Alright, they've been standing like this for the whole time. And offers Poe his hand. We can start by grabbing something to eat. That fictional dinner was tasty, but not very filling. Poe takes the outstretched hand. Don't we have to look over the information about the group we just raided? The agency basically cut their forces in half in their own territory. They won't be back tonight. We'll look over all their data after getting food and some sleep. That sounded like a good plan. Alright, where did you want to go? He's expecting Ranpo to name his favorite ramen stand or suggest takeout from the Thai restaurant down the road, but instead Ranpo says, what about that diner next to the library? Even without the name, Poe knows exactly which one Ranpo means. They've been there once during Ranpo's outrageous, never completed quest to try every restaurant on this side of Yokohama, and it had been Poe's favorite out of all the places he'd eaten in Japan. He hadn't said so at the time, since Ranpo had been focused on going to new places whenever they went out to eat together, but it seems that he didn't need to. You noticed? Ranpo nods. And if it's about my favorite person, he says, making Poe's heart leap, then I remember. The end.